Well, hello once again, and welcome to In Conversation. I'm David Paulson with the Claresholm Public Library as we go through our series of conversations with interesting folks from Southern Alberta with really cool stories to tell. And I'm excited today to be talking with Mr. Craig Patton, who is all things rugby. And that's really a good thing for me because I am zero things rugby. Craig, you've got a student here, you've got a complete fledgling. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today, and welcome In Conversation.
Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate the opportunity. Grateful that Tanner gave you my name, and yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with you today. So I appreciate that.
Well, Tanner said you were a tough coach, but I'm looking forward to chatting with you about rugby. And let's first of all trace your journey. How did you come to embrace the sport of rugby?
Well, I fell into rugby a bit by accident. I was a baseball kid growing up, and I had played all-star baseball in the city of Calgary for a long time. And it just so happened that I was down at Kingsland Park playing baseball. And at the end of my baseball game, I was about grade 9 and 15 years old. And Calgary Rugby Park was located down in that area. And I just happened to be finished practice, and one of the senior players asked me, he saw I had a pair of cleats on and asked me if I ever played. And I said, nope. And he said, well, we need players. I'd never played. I'd never seen it, never practiced. And I got into a rugby game when I was 15, and baseball was done after that point. I was lucky to go to a high school in Calgary that had a strong established program at Dr. E.P. Scarlett. And so I started playing when I was in grade 9. Grade 10, and I played up until I was 42 years old. And I got into the coaching part, not necessarily by accident, but my circumstances as a university student in Lethbridge was I started playing with the Lethbridge Club after having played with the Calgary Saints for many years. And I just happened to be a university student that had some time, and they asked me to coach a high school team. I had done my student teaching at Winston Churchill, and so they knew I had a connection there. And so I met with a number of other people in the area, and 5 of us got together and we formed the Southern Alberta High School Rugby League. And I was fortunate enough to coach Winston Churchill. And so I coached Churchill, started that program up in 1984. And I coached Churchill for 3 years, and we had a pretty successful program. But then I got hired out in Fort Macleod, and I had a friend of mine who was teaching up at Willow Creek Composite, Andrew Walmsley, who I'm teaching with at the elementary school in Fort Macleod now. And Andrew is the girls' coach, and we both started up the Willow Creek Composite team in 1987. And I was fortunate enough to coach Tanner Arnesed's dad, Barry, who was at that time in grade 11 or 12. And we started up that program. The unfortunate thing for that was that both of us ended up getting full-time jobs in Fort Macleod. So Andrew and I started up the FP Walsh team. We've always kept pretty close ties with the people in Claresholm. First, it probably wasn't the greatest relationship because we always had such a big rivalry with the kids in the town in Claresholm, but circumstances were that we had those ties, and one year we were short a few players, and I happened to know Todd Livert up in Claresholm at Willow Creek as the athletic director, and had a really good relationship with Todd, and just asked if he had kids that might be interested. And sure enough, we started to expand our program at FP Walsh, and we invited kids from Claresholm. That continued on. We had some kids from Cardston that were interested, and we've got kids from Pincher Creek. And our program has expanded even more. I've had boys from Lumbrick, from the Crow's Nest Pass, from Vulcan. They've all, Colehurst, have all come to Fort Macleod to play rugby in high school for us. So we decided that it was really appropriate that we had so many boys from so many schools in southwestern Alberta that we actually don't play by the name of FP Walsh. We actually play by the name of United. We call ourselves the United Rugby Club because we're Southwestern Alberta, and we're united. We have community. At one point, we'd had 7 boys from 7 different communities playing. And it's been really good and really successful.
Is there one thing about the sport of rugby that really, you talked about leaving baseball and pursuing rugby, but obviously there was something about the sport, maybe lots of things about the sport, but was there one thing that really appealed to you that said, hey, this is the sport for me?
The one thing that has appealed to me and continues to appeal to a number of kids is there's 15 players on a team, but really 15 doesn't cut it because it's a contact sport. You really need 25 to 30. And there's a place for every kind of athlete and a place for every kind of body type. I'm 5'5" and I'm 180 pounds, and I'm kind of built like a fire hydrant. And there was a place for me. And there's a place for all kinds of kids. Kids, fast kids, strong kids, tall kids, short kids, slow kids, fast kids. And I think that's the big thing about it is the culture of rugby is a very inclusive sport. We need all kinds of different kinds of players, types of personalities. And I think that really draws kids to the sport. We have so many kids that rugby is their first sport, if you can believe it. They haven't played basketball, they haven't played volleyball, they're not hockey. Baseball, maybe they haven't had a good experience with baseball or something. But rugby comes and there's a real camaraderie that comes with the sport. And I think that's what draws kids. It certainly drew me for sure. I was a hockey player and a baseball player, and I played some football in high school, but there was just a place for me. And I think that inclusivity is what draws people. And I build on that as a coach.
Now, you talk about inclusivity. One thing I do know about the sport is that girls and women are very actively involved in rugby as well.
And, at one point, Dave, the sport of women's rugby was the fastest growing sport in Canada. And I don't know whether that's still the case, but yeah. And the success of our women's national program has been catalyst to just vaulting the numbers of girls that participate. The men, the program has worldwide, it's not nearly as strong. I think we used to be called the best of the rest, but we've even taken a step back from that. But the women's program is ranked 3rd in the world, and they're knocking on the door. And I think there's been a lot of opportunity in Canadian universities for women's rugby. They have to give equalization scholarships, right? Because there's no women's football. So they have to give out the same amount of scholarships. And so the door has been open for women at university level in Canada. And it has just grown leaps and bounds. And Southern Alberta in particular has produced some amazing rugby players for our national team. And from girls from small communities, from Vulcan, from Fort McLeod, from Raymond, from Tabor. Girls in those small settings don't usually get those cracks at national teams, but in rugby they do. So it's wonderful.
Now, of course, for a lot of Canadians, especially, they kind of have grown up with football, and you mentioned football yourself. But and I think that because of the contact and there are obvious similarities, but there are probably bigger differences in the sport. Obviously, the equipment or lack thereof in rugby. Let's talk a little bit about the differences between Canadian football and rugby.
Well, certainly safety is a huge issue as a coach. We teach entirely different tackling techniques, contact techniques than football. And in fact, over the last number of years, with the number of concussions going up in football is actually looking to rugby for their different contact techniques to try and alleviate the concussions that happen. We teach a lot of body control And not that football doesn't, but because of the nature of the game, the contact of the game, and the fact that you don't have any equipment, in order to be safe, we really need to focus on correct body position, making sure athletes are always in a position to be safe. And we really focus on that. And it's really a part of everything we do right from the first day when we start talking about any contact, is because, you know, I've had an opportunity to play a number of years. I'm not a really big guy, but with proper technique and a little bit of guts, I can bring down, a little person can bring down the biggest guy. And so we really, really focus on the correct safety and contact techniques. It's paramount to what we have to do in order for kids to meet success in the sport. The other thing that I think is really a draw for football players is, and I've really had an opportunity to work with the coaches at Willow Creek football program, is kids that play linemen in football rarely, if ever, get an opportunity to carry the ball. Unique to rugby is everybody can carry the ball. You know, I'll get those big kids that have never carried the ball that play football, and I said, you can carry the ball as much as you want. And their eyes just light up. You mean I'm 275 pounds, I get to carry the ball? I go, yep, you do. Well, that just tickles their fancy right off the bat. So that's another thing. Everybody gets to carry the ball. Again, because we have so many different body types, really there's contact all around the field, but really it's central. Most times body types are tackling body types. And so in that respect, there's usually a little bit of equity in that. Unless, of course, you get the 270 pounder breaking the line, and then now he's got some little guy that's 165 pounds has got to tackle that big guy. But for the most part, bigs are tackling bigs and littles are tackling littles. So.
Now, in conversation with Tanner prior to this interview, and as one of your former players, he said one of your interests, and you've alluded to it already in terms of the safety aspect, but he referenced in particular head injuries, which is a huge concern, not just in the sport of rugby or football, or I'm involved with the sport of rodeo, where it's a huge concern as well. How is that being addressed specifically in the sport of rugby, would you say, Craig?
Well, over the last 5 years, both the Alberta Schools Athletic Association, World Rugby, and the Canadian Rugby Union and Alberta Rugby Union, every single coach that has anything to do with kids in rugby have to take their concussion courses. And so I think education is just really taken off. And not only do we take an ASAA concussion course, but those of us that coach beyond just high school, we have to take the World Rugby concussion course, which tends to be a little bit more involved. We obviously have followed a lot of the return to play protocols that hockey has instituted. And in rugby, they've even gone beyond those. And the return to play protocols for rugby are actually more strict than in hockey. And that's great, because parents need to have confidence that the coaches know what they're doing, and their kids are going to be safe. So education has probably been the biggest thing. You know, when we get kids that we think have a concussion, we're not a doctor, so we have to always err on the side of caution. And sometimes it costs a kid 6 weeks of his season, and our season's only 12 weeks to begin with. So, you know, even if it's a grade 1 concussion, they may miss half their year. Now, you know, years and years ago, kids may not even tell you that they banged their head. But I think education, both with athletes and coaches, have realized the severity of it. And I think just educating both athlete and coach and parent has gone a long way to helping prevent. They still happen. I'm not here to tell you that they don't happen, but we certainly as coaches, we're always mindful of those kinds of contacts, and referees have to have that same kind of education, because ultimately they're a lot closer to the action, and they may even suspect something has happened, and they'll come to us and say, I suspect your player has got a bit of a knock. You need to look at him. And so we'll look at him and we'll have to make that determination. I'm really lucky that I have some really key people in our community that have got some medical background that I really rely on. And if they go see those medical people, oh, there you are.
Yeah, and we're okay. We can actually we can edit. So the fact that we had a little glitch right there. You were just in the process of saying you were really lucky, and I'm sorry about that time we lost it.
Well, I was just saying that I'm really lucky that I have some friends in the community that have medical backgrounds, chiropractors, doctors, etc., that are rugby people. And so if I suspect something, I don't ever claim to be an expert. I've coached a lot of years and I've taken all my certifications, but I rely on the medical people. And if they come and I say, could you have a look at, my player, and I think that they need to sit out. I don't go, well, we're losing. We really need this player. No, it would be irresponsible of me as a coach to put a kid back in there that has taken a knot. I don't care, win or lose, doesn't matter. Safety of the kids first.
Now, COVID obviously has impacted virtually everything, and I'm sure it's impacted rugby as well. And I don't know what exactly happened over the last year and a half in terms of rugby. I suspect there wasn't nearly as much. And how have you coped with not having the sport in your life nearly as much as you'd like it to be?
Well, my wife sees me a whole lot more, and although I got a little bit of a tan, I'm a lot less tan than I have been. Tanner, I'm just going to let you know, Tanner was part of a group of grade 12s that graduated last year. That if Dave, I've never won a provincial championship in high school. If I was to win a provincial championship, last year would have been the year. I had 7 provincial players. I had 2 boys that had played for Canada, all returning after a team that lost in the gold medal final by 5 to a team that graduated 20 players, and I graduated 3. And so we were returning an amazing, talented group, and Tanner was a part of that group. So when we didn't have a season last year, I was absolutely devastated. And I think the kids were too. Now this year, we would have been returning a pretty good group, not nearly as talented, but I would say one that could have at least challenged for his own championship. And you never know when you go to a provincial championship, what would have happened. So I really feel bad for the last 2 years, because we had a group of really, really talented boys. Now, having said that, we were very top heavy grade 11 and 12 over the last 2 years. We struggled to get boys out in the lower grades. So if we have a team next year, we're going to be starting right from brand new. I might have 5 kids that have ever played before coming back. So I'm really going to have to go out on a recruiting mission to all our little communities around in Claresholm and in Pincher Creek and Cardston and, well, our own community. But yeah, we're going to be starting right from brand new. I don't even know if we'll have enough for a senior 15s team. Luckily, rugby has adopted the 7s program too. So there's 2, you can play 15s or 7s. So we'll probably start with a 7s program and then build. And I probably would rather start really young, like I did back in 1987. We started in Fort McLeod with just kids in grade 9 and 10, and we built from there. And that's probably what we're going to have to do. I've had a couple of parents from Claresholm whose boys, their older brothers played, and now their younger brothers want to play. And so like Ethan Hall, who's come down from Claresholm, his dad really wants him to play. He hasn't played since he was in grade 6. So he'll be coming into grade 9 or 10, grade 7, 8. He'll be coming into grade 9, having played 1 year as a grade 6. And he may have to start as a senior because grade 9s can play up. So yeah, we're going to be very raw, but I'm excited. I miss it so much. It's my passion. We'll build it. We'll get it going again.
All right, one last one for you, Craig. What do you say to that 13, 14-year-old, be it boy or girl, who's just kind of starting to think about, hey, this rugby thing, I don't know if I should give that a try or not. What do you say to that kid to encourage them to maybe give this a good look?
Well, I'd ask them to come out and try, because if they'd never played before, they really don't have a perspective or a context. Rugby is not something the kids watch on television. We don't have rugby heroes like we do hockey and football heroes or baseball heroes. So they really don't have a context. But what happens is as they get together with their team, there seems to be something that really brings kids in, especially kids that are kind of on the fringes. The camaraderie, it really brings kids in. I tell them, give it a chance. And then once they start practicing, I said, don't give up, play a game. Usually, 9 times out of 10, the kid will get through that first game and they're hooked. Usually, they'll get past that. And if they're the type of kid that's like, I'm not sure whether and I can usually tell after a number of years, if a kid gets hit with the ball, if they get back up and they get that fire in their eye, I know after that, I go, well, there's a lifer. He's hooked. Tanner was like that. I've seen Tanner take some of the biggest hits I've ever seen. And every single time he gets up and he just has that look in his eye and he just goes out looking for more action. Usually kids get hooked after that. So I just say, you got to give it a shot because you don't have any reference point. Just try it out. And usually they're hooked after the first game.
Well, Craig Patton, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today on In Conversation. And by the way, the Tanner we've been referencing is Tanner Arnstedt, who works here at the Claresholm Public Library and is our technician on these broadcasts. And of course, is a former player of yours. So great to have both of you aboard. And Craig, thanks again for taking the time. This was a fascinating conversation about a sport that I can guarantee you I would like to know a lot more about.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. All the best with your Stampede work too.
Hey, thank you so very much. Well, everybody, that's our show for this time around. Our guest, Craig Patton, was outstanding. And you can watch this one again if you'd like to. And of course, check out all of our In Conversation episodes on our YouTube channel for the Claresholm Public Library. Until next time, I'm David Paulson saying so long, everybody. Thanks for watching.